Get off the marketing roller coaster and get on the automated fast track to digitally market your brand everywhere now. Join podcast producer Tom Hazzard and Inc. columnist Tracy Hazzard as they share easy content building formulas and smart cut secrets proven to fuel hundreds of blogs, podcasts, and brands with bingeable original content. Join the conversation on how to get your message out to the world. Be original. Be heard. Promote with power and purpose. Feed your brand.
Hey everybody, welcome to Feed Your Brand. I'm Tom Hazzard, along with my co-host Tracy Hazzard, and today we are going to talk about podcast branding. And really, there's a few things to consider here, and I think it's going to be a fun topic for today.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's this sort of prevalent idea that your podcast branding should be so clever. And it should be cute and clever, and, you know, it should have this sort of fun Hollywood feel to it. And I think that is a mistake for most of our client base here, the business to business, the ones who are really going out for the business to consumer or business to business, and they're utilizing podcasting to grow that business. That cleverness that we see so often in ones like my least favorite one out there is the NBC show with Kate Snow called The Drink. Right? Is
that a podcast?
Yeah, it's her podcast. And every time she says
drink.
it on the nightly news, I want to cringe. Like, it's like, oh, and join me for my podcast, The Drink. I'm like, what does that mean? And it so turns me off that I don't even want to check it out. And so that's when it's not clear about what it's like. Is it a couple of girls having drinks together? Is it her having a cocktail on a Friday night with really interesting guests from around the world? Okay, that might be something, but cocktails and conversation sounds better than The Drink.
Yeah, really. When I hear The Drink, I'm thinking, all right, in golf, when you hit a ball and you shank it and it goes in a pond or something, you say, oh, it went in the drink.
Right.
I mean, that's not considered
a good thing.
A flattering thing.
Right. So every time I hear it, I think this isn't good. And so someone thought it was clever and wanted to give it this name. And, you know, what really also got me thinking about it was Maria Speck. She is a really great copyright attorney, litigator on that. And she gave a talk recently at a CEO Space conference that I was giving a speech at as well. And I listened into her because she fascinates me when she talks about copyright and the new rules and all of these things. And she was talking about copyrights. And it reminds me, we got to fix our banner right there above your head, right?
We need to put the registered, the R
right.
in the circle over that, because we got the registered trademark.
Right.
So
now. She was talking about trademarks, copyrights, and other things, but she was specifically talking about trademarks being of 3 different kinds. And I think of the first one as being clever, but she called it whimsical, right? It has some whimsy to it, meaning that you've created a word. And so when we created Podetize, we merged podcast and monetize together and turned it into Podetize. And so we created something that had whimsy to it. The next step is the next type of trademarks. Yes, thank you. Or logos, phrases, names of things, right? That's why we're talking about names of things, because it's the same for your podcast. You may not want to trademark it, but then again, you might, so it might be of consideration, is using an unusual word to mean something else. So like apple being related to a computer and not a fruit, right? So you're thinking about using a word for something else. Amazon to be used to create a gigantic website and warehouse and all of those things, and not being used to describe the forest, or the jungle, I guess, technically.
In South America.
Yeah, in South America, right? So, utilizing a word that everybody knows, but using it for some other thing to describe something. That's another trademarkable thing. Sometimes you can get into trouble and those don't always work. But then the other one is when you make something very clear. So like you're clearly describing something by bringing words together. And so actually Podetize does 2 things. It's clearly bringing podcasting and monetization together in that, but we created it in a whimsical way. So we've created 2 things that give us a more defensible and stronger trademark at the end of the day, which is a really good thing. We want to do the same thing with your podcast names, right? With the branding of what you have, we want to make it clear, because those that are clear are better. And then we want to add a little twist of whimsy or cleverness or fun to it. But we want to start with that. So when back when Tom and I named our first podcast, WTFFF, WTF was a big podcast out there. Mark Marone, he had just interviewed President Obama. And so it was like a big splash about podcasters in their garage and WTF. And so people were typing that in and looking for that show all the time. And we thought we'd love to trail off of that, but we added the whimsy of it, making it FFF for fused filament fabrication, which is the geeky term for 3D printing. So the geeky people out there had a chuckle.
And we also added a question mark and an exclamation point after the last F,
right?
Which added,
but be careful of that. Curiosity. You can't add like multiple question marks or multiple exclamation points anymore. They have a problem with that at Apple now.
Well, at the time,
we could do that. Yeah,
and really, it was a play on words and it was a joke because it did not mean the traditional WTF acronym. WT like what the, and then FFF represented
fused
the
filament.
The geeky term for 3D printing, which is fused filament fabrication. So it was a name, and on our cover art, it piqued a lot of curiosity. It got people to say, what is that? I want to click to learn more.
And keep in mind, Mark Marone's podcast, WTF, was really geared at there was a lot of VCs, a lot of Silicon Valley people who followed his podcast and listened to it. It had that sort of cult in the tech industry. And so it had grown up there. So if somebody was typing and looking for WTF and ours showed up, they'd be like, that sounds cool. I want to hear about 3D printing. And really clearly on our podcast cover art, it said WTFFF 3D printing as well. So we were really clear about what we were for and what it was about right on our cover art. So you would know instantly what you were getting, that you weren't getting Mark's show by any means. You were getting definitely a totally different show. So, but it may have contributed. We don't really have any kind of information from Apple that says people searched for WTF and then clicked on you. I wish we could have that information, but our show grew to 25,000 listeners in 5 months. So that was a really fast growth. And I can only say it was because we were really clear about what we did there. And we've since done that again and again with clients. And so we have done this well over 500 times now. And what we see really works better is this clearness in what your show is about, mixed with a little bit of cleverness or play on words, if you can do it and get away with it, or if you can create a twist on what your topic is, and get that through in both the name that you choose and the cover art that you create that goes with it, the branding, the podcast branding.
Yeah, it's very important, when you're considering your podcast brand, your podcast name, to understand the purpose of the name. Right? The purpose of the name is not necessarily to be super descriptive of what the show is about. Keep in mind, most people, when they're going to search in their podcast app on their phone, are going to search based on subjects they want to hear. It's keyword searching. I want to listen to a show about this or that, right? So all that's important, what's going to happen, people aren't going to search for your name. If they don't know your name, they're not going to search for it. And if they're searching for your name, you already won the battle. They know what they want to listen to. They search on your name and they find your show. So you want to come up based on subjects. And then when you're in the list of a dozen podcasts that come up in the search based on the keywords, you want your name to jump off the screen on your phone.
You want it to intrigue them and also be able to say, oh, that's what I'm looking for. So I liken this a lot more to the way that Amazon books listings go, right? So when we're looking for books on Amazon, we're searching in a category, we're searching in business books, we're searching in books on investing, books on mindset, whatever that might be. We're searching in with keywords in mind. And then we get a list of little icons, we get a bunch of little icons or a list, right? And we look at that and we go down there and we decide which ones to click on. And the reality is we don't have a lot of time to spend trying to figure out what your clever name means if it's not clear to us. So now, if you have a clearness to it in the clever name, now I'm going to check it out, right? So here's a few that I thought I would bring forward that I thought were kind of fun, ones that I really love. First off, I love Take Back Time. Penny Zanker, she's been one of our long-term clients here. Take Back Time. It's so clear. It's so actionable. It's totally what I want. And when that shows up under productivity, I'm all there. right? Super simple. And the impact of the cover art with the clock and it radiating and looking like energy there, that is like the energization of getting more time in. And so it's really awesome. So that one's one of my favorites.
I'm trying to see if it's behind us here.
Is that what you were doing?
Yeah, I'm looking around.
For those of you who are listening, Tom is like doing this like wiggle thing with his head trying to look for it.
Because we have a green screen background now. Of course, I can't look behind me because I'll just see green. And I'm looking at the screen.
It's over my head. No, the other side, right there. It's kind of half hidden.
There
so
it is. It's right over.
So if I move this way.
It is right over, Trace. Here it is, right. Oh, wasn't that it?
You go that way.
Oh, well, it's twice. I also had it.
Yeah,
it's there and it's also right there.
Yeah.
So anyway, those of you that are listening, you might go to the blog post at podetize.com and check out
we'll have all
the
these
video, and we'll also have the cover arts all in the blog post so you can look at them, not just on this video, but in full res.
Right.
So, but Take Back Time is very effective, not only in its name, it's clear, but it's also not. This is a podcast about productivity. It's not just descriptive. It's like, okay, yeah, productivity. Okay, well, it's not getting me excited, but yeah, I need productivity, so maybe I'll give it a try. Right. Take Back Time is like, oh, what is that? I need to take back time. I'm clicking that.
Right, exactly. Right? So that one's really great. A couple of them in the money side of things, because we get a lot of people are always looking for them, and a lot of them are really boring. Let me tell you, you get the word finance in there and money, and it goes over. But I like these two, Frugal Friends. It's all about budgeting. Wow. It's a lot of fun. A couple of moms talking about budgeting. It's really fun. Bad with money. Like, it's like, wow. Now that one's the opposite. Usually like we want to give them something aspirational, but there's something deprecating about that. And that kind of intrigues you. It's like, oh, that's me. Maybe I'm not alone in the world, right? I should go check that out.
Or
right?
Everybody loves to gawk at a train wreck or, a car crash. I mean, as sad as this, people get hurt. But the reality is, if you're, bad at money, it's like, oh my gosh, are these stories about people that have made some horrible mistakes? I have to listen to that.
It's going to make you click and check out the description, right? Mm-hmm. And then you're going to go, oh, that sounds like a great show. I got to check this out. It sounds fun. It sounds funny. And it also sounds like I might learn something in the process, right? So these are some really great names. Now, then I've got one of my favorite ones that I love, Dr. Elizabeth Hafer, Get Your Head On Straight. She's a chiropractor. And it's an awesome show where she's talking not just about chiropractic, but about how chiropractic clears your mind and makes things better for you. And so the cover art's awesome because it's got her head kind of crooked on there. And so,
it's a caricature.
And it's a caricature.
Yeah.
And so it's really a great descriptive show, but it's got a fun title that has a tie-in to being about chiropractic, but not so much straight in your face chiropractic, like chiropractic news or, chiropractic conversations. Not that there's anything wrong with those. It's just, they don't sound as much fun to check out. Right. So we're mixing that up. I love that one. Then I got a couple of sports ones for you, Tom. And my dad was just talking to me about golf recently. And so I thought, oh, I'll go for the golf podcast. So how do you like Barstool Sports Foreplay? F-O-R-E.
F-O-R-E.
Yeah. Right. Yep. And so, but it's clear on the cover art. It has a golf club and a golf ball, and it's clear what it's about. Right. And it says Barstool Sports right on it. But wow, I want to know about that. Right. It sounds interesting.
And that's another example, Tracy, of a podcast name and or cover art, because maybe the name Barstool Sports, clearly know it's sports, Foreplay, maybe with the name itself. In writing, you wouldn't necessarily get that it's about golf, although, if you think about it long enough, maybe you would. But initially, people respond to visual stimulus a lot faster than written words. So when you see that golf on there, the combination of the two, it's like, okay, I'm clicking that.
Right. And then my other one that they also have in the sports section is Get a Grip. And it's just the handle of the golf club and a golf ball on the cover art. It's really awesome. So those are some really great ones, but here's the thing. I'm going to give you a few lessons that we go over here, but I don't want you to overdo it or overthink this to the point. So these are fun. And look, they probably, some of these people, Barstool Sports, they've got a team of people figuring out good names there. Right. And so you have a team too. Use the Brandcasters Facebook group to help yourself and run names by others. Don't be afraid to share it in the group. Almost everybody already has a podcast or is on their way to starting it. You're not going to overlap. They're not going to take your name, but they might have some great twist and great suggestion. One of our, Scott Carson, the Note Closers show, is always amazingly fantastic at coming up with a whole brainstorm. And when I get stumped or Tom gets stumped, we text him and he gives us a whole list of ideas. So there's a team of people here for you to help out. So ask around. This is the one thing. Don't be afraid to share this and ask about it to a group of people that you belong with.
Now, Tracy, before you go on, I want to give one other little example, because what I want people to understand is this isn't just something that you would do at the time that you're launching a show. A lot of people come to us about rebranding their show, whether that's at the end of a season or they reach a milestone number of episodes or something. Don't be afraid if your show name isn't setting the world on fire in terms of click engagement. You can pivot and rename it. It's not cast in stone. You're not permanently locked into it. It can change, and then tomorrow out there in the podcast universe, it'll be different. And so I want to give an example. I'm not going to out the person's name because I didn't ask their permission, but there was a podcast about sales that came to us, and the show was the person's name. And I'm just going to use John Smith for right now. It was the
Tom Hazzard show.
Yeah, or it was the John Smith show. Really. I mean, he may have been known in certain circles in his industry of sales, but sales is a very big industry, right? And unless you're a nationally known celebrity, having the show in your name isn't going to cause a lot of people to click and try it out. So that's a good example. Well, so we worked with him to come up with what would a better name of the show be. And it took some time learning about what his perspective on sales was, his intention. He wasn't just another sales podcast. There was a lot more to it. And what we came up with was a name called The Selling Dilemma.
Now you just outed him.
No, I didn't, because he never actually changed the show name. Tracy. It's not out there. So if you go search on that show, you're not going to
find it. Well, The Selling Dilemma is available now.
Yeah,
if any of you would like that.
We went through it. We did all this rebranding. At the end of the day, for whatever reason, he wasn't comfortable doing it, and he stayed where he was, the John Smith show. And it's his show, and he's welcome to do that. But I guarantee you, The Selling Dilemma would be getting a lot more clicks. When you're going to type in such a broad category as something about sales, and there's an awful lot of shows about that Selling Dilemma, the name itself is like, The Selling Dilemma. What is The Selling Dilemma? It piques curiosity and builds anticipation. I would at least click that to find out more.
Well, and this is the case. When I said the Tom Hazzard show, even if the show is really all about you, wouldn't it be a more fun show if it was Hazardous Tales?
Absolutely.
Or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And so, thinking about that's where we want to create that kind of intriguing idea that we want to go forward. So I tell this story all the time when I give lessons on branding. So back when I was writing articles for Inc. magazine a few years ago, someone came to me and said, you wrote these stories on branding. I'd love for you to write a story about my boss. Our brand is called Big Ass Fans. And my boss has fired 3 different branding companies who wanted him to change the name. Would you like the story? Well, of course I wanted the story. So I invited her boss on the show, and he was absolutely hilarious. He was such a good interview, really got what I needed out of it, and wrote this article, which I'll link to in the blog post for this episode, but about their branding and their name. So originally they were called HVLC, which has to do with high voltage, low currency fans, which is just like such an engineering technical term.
Bad name. Definitely a company owned by an engineer.
Right. And he is. But what would happen is that, and they weren't being installed the fans were not being installed into facilities, into homes. These were being installed into
commercial,
stadiums.
Business to business.
Right.
Yeah.
Right now, I bet their business is just booming because everybody needs really great ventilation in their offices and in their buildings. Right. And so, but anyway, the fan, is really, really big. I mean, like these blades are, 6 feet long sometimes. And so people would call them and they'd answer the phone, HVLC, and people would go, are you those guys with the big ass fans? And that's how the name came up. It happened so often that they were like, big ass fans. Somebody did one day and it stuck, and they changed their whole branding over it.
I think it's brilliant.
It's brilliant. And so many times you'd hire branding firms and they said, you have to lose this name. It's offensive, like all this stuff. But the reality is that their audience, that's the thing that is so clear. Their audience is facility managers, these guys who are going to do the maintenance and installation of these things. And that they were the right audience who responded to the name and wanted it descriptive and clear as to what it was and what it was for. And it's worked out really well for them. And their business has grown because of it. And I think they were afraid to change the name at that point again, because what if the business dropped, right? And they've been doing so well. So this is why I bring this up, even though this has nothing to do with podcast naming, but this is where we get into the branding naming, was clearly, are we out there being clear about what we're doing? And the clearer the names are, the easier it is for somebody to come check that out and know that they're in the right place. And if they're out there looking for something, wouldn't it be a shame that because you put your name all over it and they didn't know who you were, that they skip it? They don't even check it out.
And unfortunately, I really think it's a common rookie error in podcasting to say, oh, well, I'm the host. I want to be a person of integrity. Of course, I'm going to put my name. I mean,
your name is on it. You're the host.
You're the host. This isn't a car dealership. I get it. If you got a Chevy dealership or a, any kind of car dealership, there's a brand. And then, all right, who's the person behind that dealership who I can trust? There's where you want to use your name. But in the podcast, yeah, as you said, Tracy, your name is always going to be there as the host with some so-and-so, right?
Hosted by,
whatever. The name, its job is to get people to click and give it a try. So you really want to look at it through that lens. Right. And if it's humorous, clever, if it's, a play on words, puts a smile on someone's face, makes them chuckle, so much the better. Not all podcast names do that. Certainly don't have to. But I mean, you've got to realize there's a time and a place to be descriptive about what your show is. It's not in the title, right? Unless it can be done in very, very short. And again, it's sort of a twist on things like Take Back Time was, right? You have a subtitle and a description of your show to be as descriptive as you want. You got to get people to give it a try, to click.
Impact. We want to have it have impact. That's right. The words that we're looking for. So the first thing I want you to do is, if you're concerned about the name that you have today, or you still haven't figured out what your name is going to be, is I want you to go check your category, your main category. So if you're in money and investing or health and wellness, check the main big category and then check the subcategory. And I want you to see what everybody else is called, because lots of them are boring out there. And so you want to make sure that you're standing out and differentiating yourselves both in color and in impact of the visual and in the name itself. And if everybody is in a very descriptive world, then you're going to have to really work a little hard to be, clever and descriptive at the same time.
Can we highlight this one, Tracy?
I don't know that I can even see that one. Well, what does it say? Oh,
Home Run Hiring. It's a podcast about HR, human resources, recruiting. Really not the most exciting subject in the world, but if you're in business and you need support there, you're going to go listen to that. But are you going to, listen to a show that says, the human resources today, or are you going to click Home Run Hiring?
I think there is one called HR Today.
There may be, but Home Run Hiring, I mean, that jumps off the page. It's going to get your attention and get you to click to give it a try.
Right. So once you've checked that out and look at that, and this is the thing, I do this every single year. So when we started Feed Your Brand, our cover art was black and green. And we had feed, and we had it looked like things sprouting. It was all the social media icons.
It was kind of like, you're looking at like a garden. And each one of the social media icons was like a plant, like the flower of a plant that was growing at different levels.
And the podcast logo, of course, in the middle, our podcast RSS feed in the middle, because we're talking about feeds, right? And feeding your brand to do that.
It's a play on
It
words,
is play on that. And so we had that name going. We had this green and black cover art. A year later, Libsyn comes out with theirs, and they call theirs The Feed, and they use black and green. And so we said, well, that's it. And so we changed ours. And so
time to pivot,
because I'm not going to stay the same. I don't want someone to come and think I copied them, even though we started ours first, right? We don't want to be in that place. We're just going to go and we're going to keep moving ahead and being original. And so the next pivot we did a sort of blue potitized colors kind of thing going on, the 2 tones of blue. And then now what we realize is now that we've incorporated Feed Your Brand into the potitized website, it's too brandy. It's too similar. And we don't like that. We never love that corporate brand look on our podcast, because if it's corporate brand associated, then people feel that you're only having a podcast to sell them something and there's no value in it. And we pride ourselves in the fact that we're adding so much value to you, whether you're our client or not. And so that's what we really want to get across. So now our colorway is basically white background, and it's got a microphone in there, so it's clear what you're about, and Feed Your Brand. And so it's got the podcasting and the Feed Your Brand going on there in white and dark blue. And so all of that is working for us. And so we keep pivoting that. I think we changed the WTFFF colors and logo 4 to 5 times over the 7 years we've done it. So it's okay to do that. Update it, shift it by checking this. And so that's what at the end of every year and the beginning of the next, somewhere in that time frame, I check and see what's going on in that category. Do that same thing and keep it updated and keep it moving. And sometimes we've twisted and we've added words or taken away words, or we shift the name slightly. So those are things that can happen. And then we can also create spinoffs. And I was just interviewing someone who had a podcast for the last 5 years. They have over 600 episodes, and he's changed his name 4 times, I think. So I think it's 4 total, and actually just completely rebranded the show within the same feed 4 times. Perfectly fine.
And you know what? That happens. The reality of our brand name Potitize, that's our 3rd brand name in this business. It really took us time for that brand to evolve, and it's not an easy thing to do. Yeah. I'm going to admit that it's really not. But once we came up with Potitize, we're like, all right, that's it. We're home.
It's the right one.
And that's why we filed to register that trademark.
So really interesting, just graphic trend I'm going to mention that's going on. And so if you are out there looking at the pivot that's happening in like big brands like Burger King and like, just lots of companies that you see their brand every single day, you're seeing a flattening of the graphics. So a flattening of the brand. So when you look at our Potitize O, and it's got the microphone in the middle and the 2 colors, that flatness, we were ahead of the trend of what's going on now. Why is that happening? It's happening because everybody's doing a mobile first design, and the high contrast or the ability to see like 3-dimensional, it's harder to view it on your phone. There's a lack of clarity, and icons and stuff get smaller, and we want to take up as much space as possible. So we're going to this sort of more like, you think it like 2 color, 4 color, whatever it is. It's more of like an old print style of graphics, but we're doing it because mobile first is the model here. And also there's an ADA issue. There is a ADA compliance for many, many companies who serve the public or are large enough, and a color contrast and the visibility, clearness of your logos and your names matter in that case. So they're doing that as well. So once you've got all of this done and you've like checked out your research, you've kind of looked at what you've got going on, I want you to think about these 3 things. And this is what we're going to leave you with today. It's thinking about these 3 things in terms of how you're coming up with your list of names. And then I want you to go and run it by your target audience. I want you to run it by your target audience, the type of people you want to listen to it, because their opinion is more important than all of us right here in the podcasting groups. They're more important than your mom and dad, right? They're the people who you want to listen to your show. We want them to find it attractive. And that's really critically important. So the 3 things that you're going to be thinking about as you're naming it is that, is my name simple and descriptive? How I built this. That's a great show, right? Are we being simple and descriptive of it? The binge factor. That's what I'm talking about, right? And everyone wants to know what that is. No weird spellings. Don't want you to use weird spellings. I know it's, it is an issue. If you are going to have to say every time you're on air, this is how you spell it. That's why we don't do hazardous whenever we can avoid it. Or when we do it, we buy both spellings. So we have a show called Product Launch Hazards. And it is about Tom and I and our experience doing this. We're the experts in that. And of course, Hazzard has 2 Z's. So constantly on the air, we have to go, and that's Hazzard with 2 Z's. If we didn't buy it both spellings, which we did, so that we wouldn't have to do that. So people who know us see the 2 Z's and go, oh, the Hazards, that's right. And then the people who don't and spell it wrong, they still get what they want. And the mindset is, oh, it's about all the pitfalls. It's about all the things that could go wrong, all the warning signs, right? So it still works either way. But weird spellings can get you into trouble because you're constantly going to have to tell people how to spell it. One of my favorite podcasters, Mike Michalowicz, right? You remember? And he has Mike the Mechanic is his URL because he got tired of trying to get everybody to spell Michalowicz.
And actually, one of the words that is unfortunately used too many times in podcast names that we always caution clients against using is the word conscious, because nobody can spell that word right. Usually they don't spell it right the first, second, or third time they try. So if it's not spelled right, your show isn't going to come up in the search results, right? So
right. Unless you are willing to do something like misspell it in your subtitle and misspell it in your description, but then again, maybe you're not willing to try that. So yes, that's another one that is philanthropy is extremely difficult for some reason, or philanthropic. Like we have people who have trouble with that. Psychology is another one, even though you might want that. It's still hard to spell some of those things. So anyway, so no weird spelling and no hard to spell things if you can avoid them. And really long words that would be too tiny, you're thinking about that as well. So we're thinking about the word and how it appears and how we are getting through it. And then we want to make sure that we're clear that we're in the right category. So that's the third thing that I want you to consider is the clarity in the category. Because if I am in a category about money and investing, and there's nothing about money in my name, it confuses people. So it's not that you have to be about money, but there should be some clear tie-in between financial well-being, money mindset, whatever that might be that you're trying to wealth, there should be a word that connects you deep to that category as an expert in what you want to be seen as. So those are all really important things. So when you think of those 3 things, the simple in description, no weird spellings, no weird phrasings, no long words, and being clear in your category. Does your name fit it? Do these names fall into that world? And then keep brainstorming and go share it with some other people who are interested in your type of show, the right target market you're looking for, and even try it with some of your existing clients. Because if your goal of your podcast is to get more clients, go ask your existing clients. Would you click on this show? Would you try it if I called it this? Right? So trying all of those things and then not being afraid to take a risk and changing later if you need to. There's no harm in pivoting.
Absolutely. I'm full believer in that. All right. Well, thanks, Tracy. That was a lot of fun. I enjoyed talking about those subjects. So hope you all enjoyed this. If you want to go again, see some of these cover arts and names we're talking about, go to the blog post at podetize.com where you can get that. You also see the video if you want to see portions of that and get any links to things that were mentioned. So hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks so much. And we'll be back next time
with another episode. Feed your brand.
For more tips, tactics, and strategies, visit us online at podetize.com or on social at podetize. Thanks for exploring the power of podcasting and how to be seen, heard, found, and rewarded in our noisy digital world. Keep on podcasting.